Hey everyone, welcome to This Explainer. If you're focused on truly understanding the mechanics of modern business, well, you're in the exact right place. Today, we're unpacking a massive, really urgent shift that's happening right now in modern procurement. For decades, procurement has just been seen as this back-office function, a cost center managed through endless, mind-numbing rows of spreadsheets. But man, that landscape has violently shifted. Today, we're pulling insights from the Procurement Edge to figure out exactly why traditional supply chain management has hit a total brick wall, and how artificial intelligence is stepping in to turn it from an administrative nightmare into a literal competitive weapon. So let's dive right in.
Listen to this absolutely visceral reality check from Sharendra, a leading voice in procurement strategy. He says, your vendors are eating your lunch, your team's drowning in paperwork. Honestly, it just perfectly nails the daily struggle of modern procurement pros. If your category strategy is just a spreadsheet right now, you're losing negotiations and you're bleeding money. But here's the thing, it absolutely doesn't have to be this way. To understand the fix, though, we first have to wrap our heads around the sheer scale of the problem.
To ground this explainer in reality, we're leaning on some deep, hard-hitting practitioner authority. We're talking 23 years of real-world experience spent right in the trenches of global supply chains. We are not talking about theoretical, pie-in-the-sky business models today. We're talking about hard-won lessons from managing procurement across some of Asia's largest institutional operations and seeing firsthand exactly where the old systems just completely fracture.
And let's look at the financial weight behind that experience for a second. Over 300 million rupees, or 300 crores, in annual procurement under management. When you're managing a financial volume that massive, you quickly realize something pretty terrifying. The scale of modern procurement has completely outpaced human capacity. The data is there, sure, but our ability to process it manually, that's totally gone.
Now throw this factor into the mix. 500 complex supplier relationships operating all at once. There is no human team on Earth, no matter how talented, that can manually monitor the financial health, the quality compliance, and the delivery metrics of that many vendors across borders. It's just impossible. This is exactly where what we call supplier risk blindness kicks in, and it's where undermanaged tail spend just runs absolutely rampant. You simply cannot handle this volume securely using manual, old-school methods.
And finally, picture 55 diverse institutional sites. When your operations and your inventory are spread out that widely, you immediately run into severe data fragmentation and some seriously bad forecasting inaccuracy. Globalization, the crazy expectations of e-commerce, geopolitical volatility, they've all stretched supply networks across endless time zones. When demand signals shift in a matter of hours instead of weeks, traditional planning across a geography this sprawling, it simply crumbles.
All right, Section 1, where procurement is broken, the structural failures.
Keeping that massive scale and fragmentation in mind, we really need to dig into the specific pain points that are causing professionals to bleed money and time every single day. Research consistently flags these same issues across organizations, totally regardless of the industry. I call these the 5 pillars of failure. First up, tail spend leakage. Second, supplier risk blindness. Third is data fragmentation, which basically means your spend data is just scattered across a dozen disconnected ERP and expense systems. Fourth, process inefficiency. And fifth, forecasting inaccuracy, where relying on clunky, outdated statistical methods just cascades errors all the way through the supply chain. Let's break down the 2 most dangerous ones here.
Let's zero in on the hidden dangers lurking in your supply chain. Look at tail spend. In most companies, about 20% of suppliers account for 80% of the total spend. But that remaining 80% of suppliers, that's your tail spend. It is chronically undermanaged, which leads to maverick buying and ridiculously inflated prices. Then, you've got supplier risk blindness. Traditional risk management is entirely backward-looking, right? It's all annual reviews and reactive panic. Because of this, organizations usually only spot supplier failures way after the damage is already done. I mean, just look at the 2021 Suez Canal blockage, all the COVID-19 disruptions, or the huge semiconductor shortage in 2022. Those crises completely exposed how little real-time visibility organizations actually had into their extended networks.
Now check out the massive chunk of time getting eaten up here. Industry benchmarks show us that buyers waste an average of 35% of their day on manual, super low-value administrative tasks. We're talking data entry, chasing down invoice exceptions, routing approvals, all that stuff. It leaves almost zero capacity for the actual strategic work that drives competitive advantage, like market analysis and really developing those supplier relationships.
Moving on to Section 2, the cost of inaction, what you are losing.
Okay, we've got to shift our focus from these theoretical broken processes to the actual, literal financial hemorrhage happening right now when organizations refuse to adapt. Quantifying supply chain inefficiency is notoriously tough because the loss is often invisible. It's savings you never realized or risks you never identified. But look at the typical loss numbers here. Organizations lose 5 to 15% of their tail spend value every year. Demand forecast errors sit at a huge 15 to 40%. And look at supplier risk incidents. Major disruptions carry an average impact of over $100 million. But the absolutely crucial takeaway here is the AI-enabled improvement. AI can shrink tail spend leakage by up to 60%. It gives you 30 to 50% earlier detection of supplier risks. We are not talking about an incremental upgrade here. This is a complete, total rescue of your bottom line.
Let's isolate just one super specific, honestly staggering statistic to make this feel tangible. Processing a single invoice manually costs an organization anywhere from $12 to $20. Well, actually, let's just call it $16 on average. But with AI automation, that cost sees an 80 to 90% reduction, plummeting down to roughly $2. Now, multiply that $14 savings by the millions of transactions a large enterprise processes every year. That is a jaw-dropping amount of working capital wasted on simple paperwork if you aren't using AI.
Which brings us to Section 3, the flip, automation versus intelligence.
To fix this mess, we have to understand a vital difference. See, the past 2 decades saw massive investments in ERPs and supplier portals, but they didn't actually solve the core issues. Why? Because they only automated the existing, broken processes. As you can see, an e-procurement platform routing a purchase order digitally is definitely faster than paper, but it's still rule-based. It still needs a human to judge every exception and classify every single purchase. AI, on the other hand, is a genuinely different beast. It doesn't just blindly follow rules, it learns patterns from historical data to make actual predictions. While traditional systems need humans to flag problems, AI automatically predicts and spots anomalies. It shifts the entire function from just reactive automation to proactive intelligence. It literally reimagines the whole process.
Which leads us perfectly to this powerful mindset shift from our source material. Procurement isn't just a cost center, it's a gold mine. Think about it. When you strip away that 35% administrative waste, when you use AI to plug up contract leakage and predict supply chain shocks before they even happen, you stop being a department that just spends money. You transform into a strategic driver of massive, massive organizational value. Finally, Section 4, Building the Edge, the digital transformation imperative. Look, the question for supply chain leaders today is absolutely no longer whether to invest in AI, but how fast you can deploy it to build an insurmountable advantage. If you need proof, just look at these incredible benchmark statistics from the Hackett Group's annual research. They consistently find that world-class procurement organizations, the ones actually adopting these advanced technologies, achieve 3 to 4 times higher cost savings than typical organizations. Their cycle times are 50% faster and their operating costs are 40% lower. And here's the real kicker. The gap between these world-class orgs and typical teams is widening rapidly as AI adoption speeds up. These are not temporary gains, guys. They compound over time as the AI models learn and get smarter with more data. So we're going to end this explainer with a pretty provocative question. Right now, most companies are leaving 15 to 30% of their value right there on the table. Vendor consolidation is an afterthought, category analytics don't exist, and AI negotiation, it feels like science fiction to them. But you've seen the data today. You've seen the true, brutal cost of inaction. So ask yourself, are you leveraging data and intelligence to build a competitive weapon, or are you still stuck in a spreadsheet? That choice is going to define the entire future of your enterprise. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.